Good morning, and thank you for joining us on today for the Back to School Game Plan. I'm Shakitha Owens, Director of the Hope Ministry at Antioch Christian Fellowship, and today we are going to be bringing you some information. We have some awesome speakers with us today. We have Sister Lynn Charles and Pastor Tomas Mohair, and they're going to be sharing some great information. We're going to be speaking today on unexpected conversations, and I'll be bringing you some information on providing you with some safe coping skills. And so we know that as we are moving into this new school year, that we ended with a lot of things going on that may have been traumatic for our kids, along with COVID. And now we got monkeypox, we got the shooting, we got all these different things that have happened. And we know that a lot of our children may have a lot of worries on their mind. So we just want to come on today and be of support to the community, to the parents, and the children to provide you with some information that may be helpful during this time with school starting. And so our first speaker we have that we're going to start with is Sister Lynn Charles.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us on today. And so I'm just going to share a little bit, a brief bio about her. So Sister Charles, she's been practicing social work over 30 years. She has a master's degree in social work from Southern University at New Orleans. And she's a licensed social worker both in Louisiana and Texas, and a supervisor as well. And she primarily works with children, adolescents, and families. And in her current position, she is the coordinator of social services for Denton Independent School District. And she also has one adult son who is also practicing in social work and school social work. So that is awesome. That's so awesome. So again, thank you, Sister Charles, for joining us this morning. And I would just like to let you start and just kind of share as we talk about those unexpected conversations, what that looks like in an educational setting, when you're having those conversations with the children, or, when they're approaching you, and just what that kind of looks like for you.
Sure. So thank you for having me, first of all, and good morning, everybody. So for me as a school social worker, which is where most of my practice has been, every day is an unexpected day. So you may have a student who has experienced trauma from any degree, from something as slight as a conversation with a parent to extreme physical and or sexual abuse, which will cause that student to have long-standing trauma issues. We have students who are depressed that come to school every day. And the beauty of what you get to do as a social worker, as a school counselor, is encourage that student to talk to somebody. So we know our kids are going through something every day. Society is just everything that's happening in the world. It's on social media, it is on TV, and we kind of feed off of that. We feed off the attention of that. So to encourage a student to, number one, I always tell kids, have a go-to person. We all have our bad days. We all have days where we don't know what the answer is going to be. But I encourage, from the elementary students to high school students, have a go-to person on campus. It should be your school counselor. It should be at least one teacher, the school social worker. It could be the lady in the cafeteria, because that student is dialoguing with that person every day. You never know who you're going to connect with. It's ultimately about trust. So you want to help that student learn how to build trust as well as some coping skills. I've had students tell me their go-to person may be the school janitor because they give that student attention. However, we also want to teach our personnel on campuses who to go to once that student gives you that information. So one of the things as a practicing counselor, we tell kids all the time, what we discuss is confidential, right? And so the only time I can say something that I have to go outside of our confidentiality is if, number one, you want to hurt yourself, number two, you want to hurt somebody else, or somebody's hurting you. And so we always tell a client, if you will, or a student on the front end that our discussion is confidential. It goes no place except in those three instances. So when a student shares with you either some form of abuse or some form of depression, then we have got to let them know up front that we want that trusting relationship, but it can't just stay between the two of us. And so sometimes that's the main part to begin conversation with students. Again, a school world is fast paced. And so you want that student to come in. You want that teacher to come in with that referral, because we don't want a student suffering silently and we don't know about it.
Wow. And so, is there a form that the parent has to fill out in order for them to receive that counseling from you?
So it happens, a counselor or a social worker could touch a student at least 3 times without parent permission, right?
Okay.
So student comes in, I think I'm upset about something. My parents had an argument last night. I'm tired of hearing them argue. We've been put out of our house. We've been evicted. And so that student could come into the parent, to the social worker or the counselor at least 3 times and have that dialogue. However, if it goes beyond 3 times, you want to include that parent. Because if a student comes to you either potentially suicidal and or depressed, you don't want to keep that parent out of that equation, because you want to, how do you get that student to where they need to be to get the proper help? Because it could be just, I'm sad because I broke up with my boyfriend, or somebody took my lunch, or somebody hit me on a playground, to something more severe, serious. And so I've experienced students who have been suicidal, that you talk to that student about coping skills, or yes, we've got to bring your parent in, and yes, we've got to do a suicide assessment in that moment. We may have to call in outside agencies like MHMR, or our hospital connections. But when it gets to a certain point, you can never not have that parent part of the equation. And you also
Okay.
hope that that parent will be a part of the equation,
Mm-hmm.
because there are times when a parent may be in denial, or, well, they're just saying that. They don't really mean that. They say that all the time. And in my head, we can never take any time slightly. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
tell a student, if you come to me every day and say, I'm sad or depressed, every day we're going to act on that, because it's the one time that something happens, you don't want to ever take that chance.
Wow, that's good. And I think that that is important, so important. And one of the reasons I was asking you about the parent involvement, because I know one of the things that I try to do when I have that initial conversation with the parent is just to let them know that I want it to be confidential. I want it to be a safe place, definitely for the kids, so that they can have that confidence in being able to, just being able to share and
Sure.
not feel
Yeah.
like you're going to be running telling their parents everything. And so I always draw that line with the parent
Yes.
and let them know, look, we need this to be a safe place. So
Yes.
we're going to try to keep as much as we can confidential, under those standards that you just shared. So I think that that's really good.
Absolutely. And it's also, again, you want that student to trust you to come to you, or
Hmm.
you want to have their peers to trust you to bring that student to you. Because sometimes a referral may not come directly from that student, but from a peer,
Hmm.
who's afraid because their friend has cried all night, or their friend is not paying attention in class, or they're cutting class. And so you have to establish those relationships. And sometimes a referral may not come from a teacher, it may come from a student that you've worked with before, who has that trust and will bring them back. But then to go back to bringing a parent in, it's important, depending upon the level of the severity of the referral, that you've got to bring that parent in day one. And that student
Hmm.
needs to know, again, those 3 times that is confidential, except then I've got to call a parent in.
Wow. All right. Reverend Mohair, do you have anything you would like to share?
No, to kind of piggyback off of what Sister Charles is saying, I think the critical point is that trust factor. Because when a child is, and based on the experience from the ministry setting, when the child is going through, and their behavior may be irrational or erratic, at that moment they're actually looking for someone to be able to connect with and talk to. They really need help, and a lot of times they don't really know exactly what it is they need until that caretaker or that person in the place of Sister Charles' position, points them in that direction. And so I think our discerning antennas,
Hmm.
really have to be on the swivel at all times, because there's a lot of stuff that's coming to a head right now based on the societal factors that we previously mentioned. So I think that trust factor plays a major role
Yeah.
in the overall process.
Yes. Thank you. Thank
Mm-hmm.
you so much. And so, Sister Charles, is there any times, I know you mentioned earlier about the suicidal aspect of it. Are there any times that the students have come to you because they have a friend that has confided in them, not necessarily the janitor or an adult, but has confided in them about being depressed or suicidal? And I know a lot of times right now our kids are self-harming themselves,
Yes.
through cutting and a lot of things that they're doing that they try to hide where people can't see.
Mm-hmm.
Um, have you had any where they actually came to you and shared about a friend?
Certainly. So a lot of times, again, it's all about building that rapport, that trust, kind of on a campus, and it only takes your relationship with one student for other students to know. And so once you've established those relationships and that they know again that they can come and trust you and that you're going to help them help their friend. And so, yes, I have had students in the past
Mm-hmm.
where kids, as you mentioned, cutters, um, it's that self harm is very common in students. They will try and find ways to hide where they'll find parts on their body where you can't see the cutting. It's not on their arm, it's not on their wrist.
Mm-hmm.
It's in places where they don't want you to know about because, of course, they don't want their parents to know about. And so when other students have known their friends or their peers, they will come or they will bring it to the school council. Again, you've got to have that trust. And the beauty of sometimes being on that campus for a long time is that you built that trust over several years with students. And so they will know to come to you. But I've absolutely had peers bring their friends and got the friends the help that they needed. And strengthen that student, giving them some self-worth, giving them their power back to where they could cope with those whatever the issues are they're dealing with in a different kind in a healthy way, versus the cutting or the drinking or the
Mm-hmm.
drugging or you know true suicide attempts, quite honestly, not
Wow.
just the cutting.
And has there ever been a time where those students that they shared with you about actually came to you?
They have. And so even the students who forget, example, the trust factor. So there was a
Mm-hmm.
student that I'd worked with before about some other issues, some home issues, some academic issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, we had that relationship and they brought a friend who was in fact cutting, who actually, this one particular student was not only cutting, but had done some suicidal attempts. And
Mm-hmm.
so again, we had to bring the parent in at that point. It couldn't just between you and I. It had to go beyond our level of confidentiality and brought the parent in, and the student actually ended up being hospitalized for a while. Came back to school, got their academics done, and actually got back on track and graduated.
Wow.
But it takes a village. I mean, it does
Mm-hmm.
take a village to support that student. You've got to have the buy-in to help the teachers support those students, the school council support those students to get them back on track. A lot of times when our kids have been hospitalized, you want to have somebody to transition that student back to campus. And so if they're in a hospital for any kind of psychiatric reasons, that they've got a support team back on the campus to receive them back so that they can get on track to get their academics done.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good. And so do you feel like with all of that, when the children come back to school, is it harder for them to fit back in? What does that kind of look like?
You try on the front end, you want to establish, well, so we already kind of have an established support system. So ideally, we've got somebody who's a liaison, if you will, between potentially a hospital and a school. So we know kind of what's the game plan for that kid for that kid to be successful to come back to school. And so you plan that out on the front end. And so when that student comes back, they can jump back into their classes. They don't have to explain where they were or why they were absent. And you hope that kids are not kind of bugging them, if you will, about what happened, because again, all that's confidential. And so you want that student to have the successful transition from hospital to school to ultimately the goal is to get that student to graduate. So our role as school social workers, our school counselors, are really and truly to be that bridge
Mm-hmm.
between student, family, home, and community, because we want students to be successful for whatever reason that they come to us. And if it's a mental health concern, we clearly want to get them the help that they need, how to help guide them. Sometimes it depends. If it's not a major traumatic event, you can talk that student through. You could have them come into your office a couple times a week. Um, but not to pull them out of class for long, because our ultimate goal in a school setting is education. And so we want to give that support, but it may not all take place at school, because in a school setting, we can't do traditional therapy, right? So it's got to be short term, refer them out, and make the right connections.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, because I think it's so important for the parents to hear that there is a process in place for the transition if the children need to be hospitalized, because I think that's a fear of a lot of parents and why they don't reach out for help to get the kids the help that they need, because they don't want to interrupt the school setting. And then, back to what you were saying before, and they're in denial as well.
Of course. Yes. I'm sorry, but the piggyback on that, like the denial piece, I always try to encourage parents, because there is a stigma that my child had to be hospitalized for whatever reason that everybody may not know about. And so just to encourage parents that if our children are physically ill, we will take them to the hospital, to the doctor, and that's acceptable. And then there are times when our kids are, we've got some mental challenges, or we've got some other issues going on, and it's okay to say, my child's getting the help that they need, and not be embarrassed about it. It's to help the parent and the child not to think that's a stigma to be hospitalized or go to therapy, because therapy is okay.
Yes. And so, Pastor Mohair, I'm going to share this one with you, this question. How do you help those students spiritually that are struggling?
Sure. Great question. And thanks for asking. And the challenge is that it is a very difficult thing to recognize that, maybe your child is struggling spiritually. The first thing that I would do is I would actually open up the Bible with them and show them what the Bible actually says about them specifically. Because a lot of times we battle with this whole identity, especially for the youngs, those that are in school, they're desiring to fit in, they're desiring to be in the in group and trying to figure out who they are, in multiple facets of their life. And so when you can sit down with them and share with them, okay, this is what the Lord says about you. This is what the scripture actually says about you, and then build upon a relationship from there. Now, here's the thing, just to call it what it is, not everybody is spending time, reading the scriptures with their child. You can still encourage them in a way that helps them, desire to want to, kind of expose who they are. If they are enjoying, recreation, if they're great athletes, you can encourage them in a way that it opens them up and allows them an opportunity, to share some of the heavy things that they're facing. Now, I will encourage those that are not connected to get connected with a local body. The recreational piece, at any ministry is going to serve you well. It's going to be therapeutic for your child to get plugged in and hang out with some other children that perhaps are experiencing something similar. And what you'll find is once that wall starts to kind of fall a bit, you have a better opportunity, to talk and to get somewhere, to get that help that is strongly desired and actually encouraged. So I would encourage everyone to just spend some time talking with their child, sharing with them who they are, because the world tells them something, completely different. And if they know who they are from the onset, it really kind of helps, reassure them as they run into some of these heavy things that they do face. A lot easier said than done, but it's a great starting point for those that have not, opened up the word of God with their children. There's a lot of great stuff in my favorite book, the Bible. So I would encourage you to start there.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Pastor Mohair, for sharing that. I definitely love the way that you, shared that from a spiritual perspective, because I think definitely knowing who you are in Christ is so important. Thank you for sharing that. And so, Sister Charles, one question I have for you, like, what would you say has been the most difficult conversation that you've had that's been presented to you?
One of the most difficult conversations that I've had to have, or not just the mental health conversations, students who are actively suicidal. Those are tough conversations. I think for me, some of the tougher conversations are kids who are experiencing abuse. How do we help those students go from to trust to talk about the abuse? Because I've always said throughout my whole career that it's really hard to look into the eyes of a child and not know what's going on inside, or not know that they're coming to school looking normal and everything's okay. And so for me as a professional and personally, it's to not to be able to see that. I mean, we can't see it, but to not to see that. And that's very hard when you do it and you're looking at kids every day. When you have kids who experience some form of abuse and going back home to that every day, coming to school, appearing normal, and you don't know, your hands are tied. On a mental health perspective, for the most part, the suicidal part is hard. Kids who experienced an even drug abuse, kids who, tampering and with drugs, and that becomes a mental health issue because the drug thing is a coping mechanism. So what's really going on for a student to do the drugs or drinking versus coming and talking about it? A lot of times those students can potentially be suicidal. That could be a part of it as well. And so they don't come to you and you don't know, and again, we rely on their peers. If they're afraid, we rely on teachers because our teachers are our eyes. They're the eyes in the classroom. They're seeing kids every day. They have that kid with them for maybe an hour if it's a high school. If it's an elementary kid, it's all day. And so the teachers are definitely the first eyes that are on that child. And you have to have that relationship. So a lot of times in a school environment, as we prepare for kids to come back, we have professional development. And so in professional development, the school counselors will present on various things, safe spaces, brain breaks. How do we get our kids to come to school and trust us and bring their issues to school if they need to? And so teachers are getting, they're being presented on that information so that they know if it presents itself in a classroom, who do they go to? Because we want the teachers as well as the lunch lady and the janitor to know who's the go-to person if Johnny comes and says, oh, this is going on, this is how I feel. Oh, look, I was cutting and my wrist is all, it's all bloody, but I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt. And this is summertime. Those are signs sometimes with our students that people outside of just the counselor social worker, you want them to recognize to bring that student to the correct place.
Awesome. That's good. And I know that we probably have some teachers watching. And if we have some teachers watching, I think that what you just shared definitely will be helpful in being able to help them to be able to create that safe place for the children to feel comfortable to be able to talk to them. So I think that is so important. For those children that may be watching that have a hard time, because I know sometimes the children don't trust.
Absolutely.
I've worked for Child Protective Services before as one of the individuals, the investigator, to come and remove those children.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what I have seen is that they don't trust. There's fear everywhere. They don't trust anybody to be able to open up and confide in because they don't even want CPS involved because they have a fear of being taken away from their family. Even though that's where the abuse may be taking place, they still love their family.
Yes.
And so just being able to create that atmosphere where you can have that conversation to encourage the children that it's okay. That it's okay. And that's kind of hard because, sometimes they end up in the system and it's still not okay.
Absolutely.
But we have to be able to at least get them to a place of being able to open up. But yeah, so how do you build that trust with them so that they will feel comfortable to be able to do that?
So one of the things is when you have an opportunity to interact with students on any level, basically with kids, just the basic bottom line thing, and I think we all know this is, kids know who they can trust. If you're just genuine with people in general and just genuine with our children and with our youth, they know that they can come and trust you because you kind of got to prove yourself to them. They're like, you got to show me, show me you can trust me and then I'm gonna come back to you. But we kind of got to prove ourselves because so many times in their lives, the adults may not have been very good to them for whatever reason. And, we talk about the CPS perspective, part of my responsibility in Denton ISD is to work with our foster kids and our kids who are homeless. And so how do we get those kids to trust when they're living in shelters or, mom or dad has said, don't go to school telling our business. And you know that the student is trusting. And it just takes a while. I've gone to classrooms and spoke to kids about trusting and who to talk to and who to go to, and just giving them the tools that they need to build up in their own little armor of tools to who to go to when they can't. Because we know that mama may be telling them at home, don't go to school telling my business to those people. And
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mhm.
real. You know, we
Very
deal
much
with that. And how do we combat that
so.
at school to help that kid have the strength to go to where they need? Because we don't want kids suffering. And so it's really hard. It just takes time. It takes time. You've got to prove yourself with other students. Again, like I said earlier, once one student knows that they can trust you, they're going to bring their friends.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because we know again, and those CPS calls have to get made on that. On the other point for that, because we're mandated reporters. So anybody in the school, teachers, counselors, you know, administrators, we are mandated reporters in a world of protecting children. And I tell I work with interns. I tell the interns all the time, we don't get to ask permission to call CPS. We call it CPS.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my perspective is I'm going to make that call. I need CPS to tell me yes or no. And so that's another way that we protect our children. It's anonymous, supposedly. Um, People are afraid to make those phone calls, and I understand that. But our job is we're mandated reporters by virtue of our jobs, and we don't get to make the choice not to. It's also against the law not to, and so you have
Mm-hmm.
to. And so again, it does take time to build that trust. You've got to prove yourself, you know, with the peers and with the other students. You go to classrooms. I've gone to classrooms and done talks, and so it's just over time. You've got to prove yourself. You know, you got to be who you are. Part of me, I believe that you treat people the way you want to be treated, and it'll take you a long way. And that's how it is with children. It really
Mm-hmm.
is. And this another thing, as far as school goes, I really believe that everything comes to the schoolhouse. I firmly believe that because parents don't know where to go if there's an issue with their children, but they go to school every day. And
Mm-hmm.
so a great place is to have the supports on the school environment to help the parents guide them the way they need to go to get the best help that they need for their children.
Awesome. Thank you. That's good. And I'll just throw out there that you were saying that the reports are anonymous, so they are.
Hmm.
You just have to tell them you want them that you want it anonymous, and you can
Hmm.
also go to the website and do it there as well, anonymously. It's better. I think it's better to do it on the website if you want to be
Yeah.
anonymous because you
Yeah,
can skip around on the questions. But if you call, they're going to pressure you for everything.
that's true. Yeah, that's so true.
So
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
better to do it online. From my experience, when I've had to do it, I did it
Yeah.
online. And just to
Yeah.
note that if you have a license or not, we all as citizens are mandated reporters.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, and sometimes that's the beginning of helping a child with their mental health needs. And
Mm-hmm.
so if we know that, the thing is, we just have to suspect abuse. We don't have to prove the abuse. We just have to suspect something's going on. And CPS are the investigators. And so
Mm-hmm.
when I'm talking to teachers, even when I'm talking to students, when we have those 3 times when I can't keep it confidential, there's a time when I have to. I'm not the investigator. And
Mm-hmm.
so I know sometimes from a teacher perspective, you know, they're in that class with their kid, and so they've got to interact with that parent, and they don't want to retaliation. And some the parents will get angry, you know. But it's to encourage on that part for the teacher that it's anonymous, and you're really helping that student.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get to pick and choose whether or not we report, and we don't have to investigate. We don't have to ask all the questions. We just need to suspect abuse, and then
Yes.
CPS will take it from there.
Yes. And so, Pastor Mohair, I'll just ask you, what do you think about all of that from a spiritual aspect?
Well, a lot. I think the fascinating thing is from a ministry standpoint, we have a select few hours out of the entire week. You know, from the school setting, you know, you have roughly 35 to 45 hours a week that a child is going to go to school. If they're student athletes, you know, that might alter a bit. But from the ministry standpoint, we have about less than 5 hours an entire week. And that's assuming, you know, the child is active on Wednesdays and Sundays and arrives on time and maybe even stays after a little bit for donuts or whatever. But we all know that doesn't always, you know, pan out that way. And so what we find is the time that we do have them, we've got to love them in a way that they feel comfortable enough just to be in that safe place, to be in that safe space to where if they have questions or if they have experiences at home that are kind of plaguing their everyday behavior, they'll share that, because we do multiple things, and we've actually tweaked up our service for Sundays because unexpected conversations have been a thing a lot
Mm-hmm.
lately. Just a few weeks ago, without sharing too many details, we were teaching on David and Goliath, and the everybody knows the story. One of the children heard that David slew Goliath, and as we actually read it out of the scripture, I noticed that there were some tears, in the room. And so one thing that we do when we see emotional changes or unexpected emotion is the team of leaders that work with me will kind of key in on that and maybe even dig a little bit deeper if we need to. In this particular setting, her sister was right there with her. So, we started asking a few more questions, and then her sister just started sharing what's going on. Certain words triggered her emotion. And
Wow.
what we found was there were multiple deaths, throughout the pandemic, throughout their family. And all of these things were really impacting her on a very strong level. And so what we found was it was a teachable moment for all the children in the class. And what blessed us was the fact that since she was having a situation right there in the class, we didn't sweep it under the rug.
Mm-hmm.
We embraced it. We stopped teaching, and I literally was able to just minister to her and her sister right there in the class. And we talked about stuff that's not really comfortable for children. But
Mm-hmm.
God gave us a platform to have that conversation right there. And when I tell you, before you know it, children were asking all types of questions. They felt safe. They felt like, okay, all right, there's some hope here, and it blessed my heart. And the teachers in the class were like, okay, yeah, we definitely had our agenda altered, but it was perfect because these guys have an opportunity, they have a place to where they can actually voice, their concern. And it's fascinating to me because we have a small amount of time to do a whole lot, to
Mm-hmm.
really help shape, mold, and guide children in point 0.5 minutes, right? And it's a wonderful thing because that's where you get to see God doing some work,
Mm-hmm.
and we've seen that. Another thing that we did to kind of help with our game plan was we started, a teen service. The teens have been in a very tough place. I mean, imagine we're going through a pandemic mentally. We're seeing racial injustice. It's affecting us mentally. We're seeing all of these challenges with homelessness, with job loss, and all of these events are traumatizing. But to an adult, sure, we know that there are things that we can do to really kind of express how we feel. Some of us even have groups, like this team here, to where we can go and get encouraged and get loved on. But what about the child, who doesn't really know how to communicate, who doesn't know how to cope with those specific scenarios? And so the environment that we're fostering is built upon authenticity, compassion, and sacrifice. And I say that sacrifice because I don't know if you've ever talked with children, but when you have that conversation with a child, it can go from riding bicycles to I have some cuts on my arm to my mom gets off at 3 o'clock and all of this stuff. And it's going to be a sacrifice of time. And God gives us 2 ears for a reason. Now more than ever, a part of our strategy has been to listen. And then when that time comes, we have the opportunity to assess what's going on. And then if we hear any of the trigger words, things that alarm our attention, we've got to escalate it immediately because we have that short opportunity, and that window is only open for a short amount of time. So in the ministry setting, things are a bit different, but we're really kind of traversing on the same path that you were mentioning there, Sister Charles.
And just to piggyback on what you're saying, Pastor Moore, I really appreciate when you talk about triggers because we it's the things that we don't even expect is going to trigger a student. Like, you were given that lesson, and who knew that that child would be triggered, and it would bring up all these other issues. And so sometimes we have the ability, like when the children are at church and children's church, we can kind of hone in on a small group of kids and just have that knowledge, know that student, know that they can trust you, because the least little thing that you have no idea you're talking about, all of a sudden you get there's been multiple deaths, there's been multiple, suicide issues or depression within the family, that a child is experiencing that they bring into church every week that we would never know until something came up. And so I appreciate the fact that being in tune to the triggers and being in tune to when a child is doing just a little different, something's different about this kid. And I think that's awesome that y'all are in tune to that as well. Yeah.
Well,
That's
I
really
think, and you bring up something that's valuable. Those triggers and the big picture. The big picture is the child is screaming
oh
for
yeah.
help. I mean,
Yes.
like screaming. And case in point, just several months ago, and I actually shared this in class several months back. My wife and I and children were actually about to go on vacation, and so we went to Taco Bell. This was late in the night. Don't judge me. But we go to Taco Bell. We pull around, and when we get to the cash register, we see a lady, and there's cuts all up her arm. And I noticed it immediately. My wife is kind of talking to our children, and she notices that I'm actually praying immediately at that moment because I see an issue right then and there, and something has to be done. God, I need you to help me right now. And I talked earlier about having those discerning antennas. Well, what happened was God said, Tomas, I want you to pay for your meal and the next two cars behind you. And I
Wow.
want you to tell her that Jesus loves you, and to tell those two cars behind that Jesus loves them too. And that's exactly what I did. And as I
Mhm.
paid, it took about 10 minutes because, we were getting these transactions, right? And the guy that was cooking the food, he was back, and he heard it all. And he was like, man, that is the most awesome thing I've ever heard. And I said, God bless you. And we drove on, and I said, God, you're incredible. Thank you. Because I don't know how it impacted her, but the look on her face was priceless. And she doesn't even know that I saw the arm. That didn't even matter. What I saw was she was screaming for help. And
Mhm.
that's the approach that we have with the entire children and youth ministry. The big picture is when they come in this wall, man, they need to feel like a big bear hug on sight because
Mhm.
they're battling on a whole nother level and they never mention it until they get to that point, to where they're open and comfortable to share with some authentic people about
Mhm.
what's going on in their life. So I think us looking at every single thing, and I tell the team, hey, time they get here, that's our time to love on them. So you need to check your egos at the door, put whatever
Yeah.
you have going on. That's secondary right now. I know you might have had a rough journey getting here. That pales in comparison to what we've got to do in this short amount of time. And it's been nothing short of amazing. It's been awesome because God is doing what he does and the children are coming. We have children that we've never met before, we've never seen, and
Mhm.
God is just bringing them and bringing them. And I believe it's because we're loving them and the foundation was laid and we
Mhm.
have an opportunity to shepherd God's children. And it's a phenomenal task. It's tough, but I think
It's
with
tough. Yeah.
leaders like you guys, it makes it awesome shouldering the load and working together to get this thing done.
But the beauty is that to have a team that is in tune to things that are not going to just be on surface, just the stuff that's under the surface. That's the beauty. I think there was a question about what if a student is triggered and the teacher doesn't recognize, isn't
Yes.
picking up on it. That's a hard one. Again, that goes back to having the opportunity in spaces where you can talk to students in general about who to go to if there's an issue. Because sometimes, teachers are focused on education sometimes. And we're expecting teachers in the classroom to be the nurse, the teacher, the social worker, the everything. And so they've still got to teach. And so any event a teacher's not picking up on a trigger of a student, I would encourage that student, if you know who the student is, to go to somebody. Again, giving kids the opportunity to know who to go to. Who's your go-to person? Who's your go-to person in your family? It may not be the mom or dad. It may be grandma, maybe an aunt, maybe an older cousin or an older sibling. But encouraging that kid to have a go-to in the event the teacher's not picking up on the trigger. Um, we expect our teachers to do a lot, and so that is one of the things we kind of hope that they can do. But everybody may not be in tune to doing that, and so again, if it's a student, have that go-to person. If they don't, if that person's not hearing you, you got to have a go-to person, a second person. You know, every kid's not going to want to tell their story, and so sometimes you just have to again be in tune to, as Reverend Mohair said, just to kind of pay attention to what's kind of going on with that kid. If they're different, if you got a kid who's normally talking a lot and now they're quiet all of a sudden, that's a trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Or you got a kid who's quiet, and vice versa. That is a trigger. You kind of got to know your students, and unfortunately, we're not all in tune to that. Unfortunately.
All right. So thank you both for definitely sharing, on what that looks like in educational and spiritually as well,
Yeah.
um, as well. And so what I would like to do now, because Reverend Mohair, we pulled you in to help us out with the educational setting as well from a spiritual perspective. But I definitely want to go ahead and officially introduce you. And then we will go a little bit deeper into the spiritual side as well. And Sister Charles, you can help us out a little bit as well.
Okay.
And so I'm going to start out. I'm going to go ahead and introduce. We have Pastor Tomas Mohair. Um, he studied at the University of North Texas, earning a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology. And it is there at the University of North Texas he pledged Omega Psi Phi. Yay. He was voted president of the organization and led the fraternity to win several honorable mentions in the Den community. So that is awesome. Pastor Mohair received a Master's of Divinity in Leadership from Liberty University in December of 2020. And he's a husband. He's a father of two, a 3-year-old son and a 1-year-old daughter. And he is presently serving, as we know, what he's shared already, at Antioch Christian Fellowship, serving God's children. So thank you so much, Pastor Mohair, again for sharing with us, the spiritual perspectives that you've shared thus far. And so I will just start with you and just sharing. I'm gonna ask you that same question. In the church, what that conversation looks like when the children present with suicidal or depression. I know you just shared the story that you just shared earlier, about, you were able to catch on and really connect with the young lady that you were speaking of earlier. But have you had any situations where they've actually asked you, more about it?
Absolutely. Great question. And yes, in light of where we are, we've talked about, the pandemic, injustice, and multiple factors, that push people, that put a lot of pressure on, our children, and multiple children have come this way and made mentions of friends, who are dealing and not dealing so well with the current status of society. We had situations where children will talk in third person, and not necessarily talk about themselves, but really describe a situation that someone is dealing with. And we have to take that information as if it's them, and every single word that is spoken, we hold on to that, and we're assessing and discerning at the same time if this needs to be escalated, if it's anything that's going to harm or cause damage to themselves or another person, if it deals with abuse or anything that raises those antennas, we have to share it, and we let the child know at the onset that if this is something that's going to cause some damage to someone else, it's our duty to let someone else know, and that's kind of like the consent, if you will, and we have to get that out the gates. And when we start there, and then the conversation proceeds, then we can begin talking about, what it is that needs to be discussed. But there have been multiple scenarios to where children just don't know how to handle,
Mm-hmm.
some of the pressures they face. Some of the athletes under a great deal of pressure don't necessarily know how to communicate it to, mom and dad. Children doing drugs, it's apparently a huge thing on the
Mm-hmm.
campuses, and vaping, and doing all types of things, and thinking that it's, that they're hiding it. But the truth is, it's out there, and they're screaming for attention. They're screaming for help. They're looking for hope, and placing, their hope in all of these different substances and different things. And so when it happens, in our vicinity, based on the information, we have to tell the parents if it's something that warrants, a discussion with their parents. And we do, and we let the child know, And our hope is that even when we do share the information with the parent, that they continue to come, because the truth is, some parents do, like Sister Charles was mentioning earlier, some parents do feel like it's a slight, towards them, or what goes on in this house stays in this house type of mentality. I mean, that's the kind of mentality we grew up with. Hey, son, what goes on over here stays. But the
Yes.
truth is, if they're speaking on it while they're in the ministry setting, then it's an issue. Then it's something that needs further attention. And so it's a balance that we are working to find. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it's perfect, but I will say a lot of stuff has surfaced, and we're working behind the scenes with different mitigation strategies, ways that we can cultivate even further safer environments for each and every age group, because some of the things that the teens deal with, the youngs, the in-betweens are not necessarily facing, and so on and so forth. And we want to be able to funnel them exactly where they need to go. But I think the most important key is being open to having that conversation and loving on them and helping them understand it's going to be okay. There is hope, and there is a solution. There is some strategy that we can employ, but it's going to require them to, take some action as well.
All right, that's awesome. And so we got one question that popped up. How does the church handle the situation if the child comes to the church and say, "Don't tell my parents"?
That's a great question. It depends on the material, whatever the situation is. And in my situation, I'm going to talk with wise counsel on anything that warrants some strong or further escalation, and make sure we cover all bases, because that might be their desire, and I understand that. But at the end of the day, the big picture is, how can we best help in this situation? And if that means the parents need to know, then that's okay. I'm not in the business. We're not in the business of, trying to appease the child. We're in the business of, let's see what God says about this and how we can push people in that direction. Will it rustle some feathers? Maybe so. Will the child, maybe they might not want to go in that direction anymore. That might be the case. That's a risk that we're willing to take if the big picture is they're going to get some help and we push them in that direction. So if they're doing something that's harming somebody else, if they're plotting, if they, have weapons that they're harboring in their room, yeah, we're definitely going to have a conversation. Because as we pray, that the schools are protected, and we hear something that might do some unprotecting, then, we want to make sure we're on top of that and handle the situation. So it's a case by case scenario, but most of the time, if they're parents, if it's something that warrants escalation, we're going to have a conversation, with the parents.
And can I just say something real quick to piggyback on that? Yes, and sometimes we take that risk. Child does come to us, they trust us, and we know the parent may not be so open to the child coming to us and talking their business, but we take that risk, and our risk is it's all about how do we protect children? How do you protect families ultimately? Because if there's that family secret that nobody's talking about, but we know that kid is triggered and having some issues, then we've got to break that generational curse. Like, how do we stop that from happening? And so I think for them to have a safe place at church is awesome, because it may be uncomfortable for the parent, but ultimately it's how do we help that not only that child, but that whole family move from where they are to a healthier place. Ultimately is the goal.
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I see a question here. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. It says, what goes on in our house stays in the house, has damaged so many individuals. How do you minister to students trying to have those unexpected conversations? Well, that's a great question. And you're right. I'm actually a product of that to a certain degree. And it's a very interesting thing, because when you trace back to some, family history and some of the challenges, that you've seen in the past, and you start to connect the dots, you'll find that so-and-so never dealt with that. And then their parents never dealt with that, and so on and so forth. And now here we are struggling on a whole nother level, wondering why we're erratic in some of our thoughts and some of our actions. And what we find is that has been swept under the rug for so long. And now, more than ever, I'm encouraging everybody to surrender first these emotions, our heart, our mind, our soul, to the master. Who's the master? The King, the great I am, God, Jesus the Christ. And I say that because He's the only one that can handle everything that you throw at him. But then when he
Yes.
gives you instruction, we've got to go in that direction. If he says, hey, tell the truth, go talk to this person, about what you're dealing with, and they'll point you in the right direction, or they'll pray with you, they'll help you overcome some of those challenges. Because make no mistake about it, it might ruffle some feathers, at the household. But when you have wise counsel, you have other people who dealt in this specific place, it's going to help work out for all parties involved. And what you'll find is maybe mom and dad are being healed in the process, because you decided to speak out on something that has been a major hindrance, or something that's been triggering a certain emotion in you for quite some time. So I would encourage always to speak the truth, always to speak the truth. It's not always easy to do, but count the cost, but always speak the truth. And Sister Charles, if you want to tag in on that, feel free.
Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that sometimes there is a cost. I think, again, we've had generational ways that families have dealt with stuff. I think historically, counseling is not, or therapy is not something we do. But it's now that we're talking about things more, we're encouraging families more. All of us, who cannot benefit from having somebody bounce things off of? Because, yeah, what could happen in this house stays in this house. We don't talk our business. You sure don't tell it at school, and you sure don't go to church and talk about it. And so, just giving children those encouragement to have safe spaces. And sometimes we have to prove ourselves. So we could talk it all day long, but until one kid sees another kid has trusted you and you've done some good for them, then we've got to prove ourselves all the time, because they're coming from a place of with a lack of trust, depending on what the situation is, for sure.
Yes, I definitely agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
And one question I have for you, Reverend Mohair, we know that when it comes to mental health, that sometimes we know that there's a stigma that comes along with it. The same thing as we're talking about right now, about what goes on in this house stays in this house. There's a lot that goes on with the mental health aspect, just because now you're talking to business, even in mental health counseling. So there's a lot of parents that don't believe in counseling. I hear it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just wonder what could you share to help the parents, especially for those, and this is kind of a two-part question, especially for those that um, are so deep in their faith that we focus on the spiritual side. We focus on the demonic aspect of the mental things that are going on, but not the psychological, if I'm wording that correctly.
I think I'm with you. I think I'm with you. And so, two things. Well, first, I think it's fascinating how we can get to the place to where we have this incredible faith that we don't need to go to the doctor, or we don't need to see a counselor and all this stuff. And it baffles me, because when you think about it, we have Christian doctors, we have Christian mental health experts, we have all of these individuals that God has employed to do his business in whatever space and place that is. And so I'm a strong advocate for seeking wise counsel, and that might be by way of a mental health professional. I think about it, when you have a headache, we take an Advil or aspirin. We don't know the molecular compound structure of that pill, but we expect that it's going to help with that headache. Well, if God has placed all of these healthcare professionals in place and they are the expert in that area,
Mm-hmm.
why wouldn't we go and see what they have to say about this specialty, this specific matter that I have? My wife and I, during this pandemic, she lost her father, I lost my dad, we lost two grandmothers, and a whole lot of loss. We lost a dog, his name was Armani, he was a little Yorkie, and all of this loss. And my big brother and I were talking, and we bounce ideas off of one another all the time. And he said, little brother, have you thought about counseling? And I said, yes, now more than ever. And when I tell you, there's some grief counseling that we offer at Antioch, and I was going through some of the curriculum and spending some time with one of the representatives, and it was awesome. It was awesome. We laughed, man. We cried. I healed. I got the help that I needed. And my faith even got stronger because God has employed people for these specific reasons. So I would say counseling is an absolute must, because what you'll find is there's a professional that can steer you in a way to where you're more open and ready to receive what God has for your specific life. It's a phenomenal thing. I would encourage you after this meeting today, if you're battling mentally anywhere, if your child is having some difficulty, yeah, let's see what we can do about helping. It doesn't put you in a category. It doesn't say, oh, you're weak here. No, not at all. It says that, man, you've got some intelligence because you're taking the next step to actually get the help that you need. I absolutely think it will be a phenomenal idea. And if you need some referrals, for those that are married out there, I know a lot of great individuals. My wife and I have gone to marriage counseling, and we're strong advocates, because as much as I love the Lord, Tomas makes mistakes. Tomas has some mental challenges, right?
Mhm.
You know, and just like my wife, and she's incredible. But the beautiful thing is, God joined us together, and He put people in our circle that are going to help us. We're not the smartest people in the circle. I'm not the smartest person in this group. These guys are incredible. So I want to encourage you, avail yourself to some of the opportunities that you have before you. And if you want to talk with me about any of it, I've got two big ears, and I would love to sit down and love on you, your child, or whoever steps foot in the church or knocks on my door. I would love to. I mean that from the bottom of my heart, for real, because the bigger picture is, man, this thing is real. The scripture says, in this world, we will have trouble. But then he goes on to say, take heart or be of good cheer. Why? Because he's overcome the world. And since we know that we're going to have some difficulty, we're going to have some trouble, we're going to have some mental challenges, we're going to have some heart challenges, we're going to have some problems, I want to encourage you, man, get plugged in. Get plugged in. We have some resources available for you. We have a team of people that want to bear hug you and hold on to you and help you get this thing locked and loaded so that you're better suited to be with your family and do what it is God has called you to do. I think I might have answered your question, Sister Owens. I might have went on a tangent a little bit, but I see your lips moving, but I think you're on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Thank you for bringing up the marriage counseling as well, because I think that is so important. And Sister Charles may experience this as well, because I get a lot of parents that bring their children to be fixed.
Yes.
And my thing that I have to share with them is that we're not miracle workers as counselors. And majority of the time, whatever's going on with your child, it started in the house. That part that you wanted to stay in the house that we don't talk about, it started there.
That's
Right.
true.
So we gotta fix those broken homes, those broken relationships, those broken marriages. We gotta start there first, because a lot of times the children are just being rebellious and they're acting out on what's going on in the house, because it starts there.
Yes. And let me just
So-
add real quickly too that now that we're encouraged to go seek seek mental health counseling and talk to somebody, it's not always going to be a good fit. And I encourage parents all the time, you may get a counselor, a therapist out there that is not a good fit for you and your child.
Mhm.
That is okay, because there's somebody else that God has already put into the world that's going to be a better fit for you. So don't start with one. Like if you go to a doctor that's not a good doctor fit, then you find you another doctor. So I just encourage a parent, don't stop if you know that your child needs some help, because it is not always going to be a good fit. And that is okay. There's always somebody else you connect with, certainly.
Awesome. Thank you. And we got a message here from Reverend Stewart that says, just because we go outside the church for help doesn't show that we don't trust God, but that we use everything God has allowed to be for our benefit as a blessing. So,
Amen.
yes, that is awesome. 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 All right. So I think that that what we'll do at this time, I'm going to go ahead and thank you both. Do y'all have any additional things that y'all would like to share? Because I think some of the questions that I was going to ask you, Pastor Mohair, we already done discussed it, because you went in deep. So you did both of y'all did a great and awesome job. And I just want, again, for the parents to be knowledgeable, to know how to help their children. We want the children to be knowledgeable how to go and seek help. And it goes both ways. And I know that those are the two places where our children spend a lot of time, is at church and at school, and then at home. So we need the parents on board. We need the teachers on board. We need the church leaders on board. We need everybody to be a part of this village that we're in the process of creating. And if it's not created, as Pastor Mohair said, get plugged in. We need to get plugged in and make sure that our children and the parents are, we're all on the same page. And so I am going to, I'm going to share some additional resources. And so one of the first things that I want to share some for the parents, some things that you guys can do at home. And the very first thing that I'm going to say is definitely you got to take care of your own mental health first, because you cannot provide what you need to provide for your children unless you are mentally stable. And so if you have a lot of stressors going on and you have a lot of things going on in your life, we want to make sure that you are plugged in spiritually and that you're receiving the help that you need in that area to help you grow. But definitely you want to make sure that you are getting the mental help that you need as well. And if you sense and see that your children may need help mentally, go ahead and reach out. As everyone has pretty much shared this morning, help your children get the help that they need. As Sister Charles has stated, a lot of these things that I was going to share, we've already talked about. Definitely make sure that you are connecting with the counselor, with the school counselors, the social workers. Connect on the school level to make sure that that they are getting what they need at school, and you can get the resources, because the resources are there to be able to be provided. All you have to do is ask. We know that you ask and you'll be fed. You'll get the information. All you gotta do is open your mouth. There's so many resources. I know at Antioch we got a lot of resources. All you gotta do is just open your mouth and ask if you need the help. And if you're in the community, it doesn't matter if you're a member of Antioch or not. If you're in the community, reach out and ask. I mean, we're here. That's what we do. We're part of the community, serving the community as well. And you want to encourage communication with the kids. We've talked about encouraging communication on the school level. We've talked to the leaders about what they do, in their setting. And so we want to make sure that you have a strategy in place at home to be able to do the same thing. Because of course we've said it starts at home. What type of communication do you have set up for the children to communicate with you? And the one thing that I always love to share is that when your child walks through that door, a lot of times the first thing as parents, what we ask, how was your day? Was school good? What you learned? I know I've been asking that. What did you learn today? Did you make some friends? We start asking all these questions. And sometimes the kids just don't want to talk. They may just be like, good. That's their favorite phrase, good. Even in my therapy sessions, how was your week? Good. And so I'm telling you, as parents, the way to open up that door, because we call those missed opportunities. Because if they say good, I'm going to give you some counseling tools to use. You dig on in. We call it just probing a little bit. All right, what was good about your day? Yeah. And then that just may be a way for them to open up and share, today I met a new friend, and there go your conversation. There go your gateway right there. Because a lot of times they want to open up and talk. But if you never create that safe space, there you go. You're creating that safe space for them to open up. But if you just accept good and go in your room and close the door, they're going to be like, wow, well, all right. Well, I did want to share about my day. Yeah. But being able to probe and dig a little deeper. And so just looking for those moments on an emotional level as well, when you have an opportunity to probe as well. So if they're telling you they're not feeling good, that next probing question, okay, tell me what's going on. Why are you not feeling good? Don't just leave it. Don't just leave it. Because if they brought it up, that means they want to talk about it. So I think that is so important to be able to do that, to open up that communication and just focus in on that the vulnerability at that time. Because sometimes we can catch them and they'll talk. I know both of y'all probably know. Right. You get them right in that right spot, you will be like, okay, you done?
Right. Be like, can you wrap this up?
Yes. So we just got to get them in that right spot and
Mhm.
get them on a topic that they want to talk about. And if you find the kids, another thing with communication, if you find the kids sharing and talking about things that you find them talking about things that they enjoy, whether that be, even their video games. If they're talking about things that they enjoy with their video games, get in there and try to learn about what they're doing. What are they playing? And even just connecting with them on that level. Even though you might not like video games, this is something they enjoy. If you're allowing them to do it, try to connect with them on that level and try to learn some things that they're doing. And so that'll help them with being able to connect with you on that level as well. So that then they're comfortable and they have that place to where they're like, okay, mom is, enjoying this. Maybe I can share this with her now.
Mhm.
And so, but that's just another place where you can do that as well. And just know
Sister,
when you're,
I'm
yeah,
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I
sure.
like the fact that you expounded upon that whole response, good, because in today's times, that word has multiple definitions,
Yeah.
and I think people miss that, and I think it's awesome that, we've got to ask another set of questions because good has become universal for, I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm mean, I'm not, I didn't do nothing. And you're right, we have to ask more questions because I tell my son all the time, good ain't good enough. I need to know some more. Tell me more. So thank you for bringing that up.
Awesome. Thank you. And so I love to expound on that because I know that sometimes we'll just accept that and leave that door closed and take it no further. And
Mhm.
so it's just good to be able to, to be able to do that and not just when they come home from school, pay attention and be aware of when those times happen. Because the word may not just be good. They may have another way to just fan you off. And so pay attention to when they're doing that. And you just find a workaround and a way to get in that space.
Yeah.
Because they know how to put up those barriers. They know they know you. So they know how to just make you move on even when they don't feel like talking. And so I just think that it's important to know your children, take heed, to them surroundings and what's going on and what they're showing you. And that way you can be more active and be able to participate more in that whole communication and be in tune with their emotions as well. And I always love to share about that closed door, and a lot of our times when you were growing up, when that door was closed to that room, a lot of those doors got the hinges took off of them. You weren't allowed to do that. But these days, we know these children are allowed to do a whole lot. Stay in their room all day long and not come out. And you never
Yeah.
know what's going on with your child, what social media they're on, who they're talking to. Snapchat and all of this stuff that they got going on now. Like if you're not in tune and don't know what's going on, then that's a problem. You need to know what's going on. Don't just let them close the door and ignore their daily lives. Get in tune and find out what they're doing. If they on Snapchat, if they'll let you, you be their friend on Snapchat too, because I want to see what y'all talking about. So
Right.
that may be a little bit of a boundary for them, but I've heard children that do that, and they're like, oh, my mom, my friend on Snapchat. I'm like, okay. We have a statement here by Sister Q saying, I've noticed with my child that sometimes he doesn't want to talk right then, but when I go back 30 minutes later, he's ready to talk.
Hey, Sister Q, all you gotta do is just get on the phone, act like you got a conversation, and then he gonna be ready to talk.
I love it. I love it. All right. So we say great recommendation to visit with them in the gaming space because they are speaking with and securing information via Twitch, etc., as well as social media. Yes, Brother Simpson. Yes, they are. They're all in that space. And so if we can tune in with them, I know I was in there with my son the other day while he was on the video game and I'm just looking at him. I'm watching him play and he's confused because he's like, okay, mom, why are you watching me? And I'm like, well, I want to know what you're doing. Who is that in the red shirt? What are y'all doing? What's the mission? What's the purpose? What's going on? Educate me. I might not want to play, but at least I want to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And one of the things I like to interject, if I can interrupt, is to have an opportunity for parents to know what social media apps are out there. Because we as parents they're 10 apps ahead of us. So by the time we figure out what's the latest app to know what they're doing, and that's another way to communicate with them, because you kind of know, as you said, what they're doing and what they're talking about. But if there are these apps out here that are not safe spaces for our children, we need to know that. And so a good place is to get that education from somewhere about social media, I don't know, 101 for parents, because again, when we think that we've got them in a safe place, we know their passwords and their passcodes, they're on to app number 5. They're like way past that. And there's apps that's out there that are not safe for our children that we really need to know about what those apps are. And I can't address, there are lots. I can't address what those apps are. There's a question. Yeah, know the apps that your children are using. That is key to communication with your children. Communication cannot start when they're 10. It's got to start when they're 1, 2, and 3, because you build on that communication with your child. It doesn't start right when you think it's supposed to start. It starts way, way young.
Yes, that's good. And one tip that I can give to parents that I'll share today, and this is one that I use, because my son, he's younger. I mean, for some of you may have older children. He just has a phone. There's no there's no connection. He just has a phone where he can play on it, play games and stuff on it. But one of the things that I have realized is that with Spectrum, I can go in Spectrum and I can manage all devices that are connected to my internet. You can schedule a time for when the internet comes on and when it goes off for that particular device, whether it's the Xbox, the PlayStation, the phone, every electrical device that they own, you can set a timer on the internet when it comes on and off. So if you don't want them on that game after 6 o'clock, after they get home from school, you can shut it down. You can have it already, it shuts it down automatically. Or if you want to, you can pick specific days, like for the weekend, if you may want it on a little longer, you can go in and create a whole schedule of the internet activity for those devices. So I would tell you to check around if you have, the services that you have. If you don't have Spectrum, check with, your internet provider and see how you can set that up, because there are ways around being able to control that if you're not there all the time. Because I've had my son calling me when I wasn't even at home. Can you please turn on the internet? And when it shuts off, what time is it? The internet off already? It sure is. Your time is up, bud. So,
because as parents, we get to control their world to some degree, and so especially when they're young. And so, if it's some families, I know, they take up the devices at a certain time at night, so you don't get to go into your bedroom with the device and on some social media app that could lead to some mental health issues. Because they're not the most positive things out there. In terms of suicide, encouraging suicide, encouraging cutting. We know that we can learn anything on YouTube. And not always the best things we can learn. And our children are doing those things, and at least have not very good mental health choices.
And I think that's very important. I think one thing that a lot of times, sometimes, parents feel guilty of, and I say, do not. Man, it's okay to be extremely nosy and be extremely not really controlling, but controlling to your child. There's nothing wrong with that. It's okay to love them so much that you're actually saying, no, you can't watch the device for 16 hours. You can't watch Netflix for 219 episodes. It's okay to say no. Like, it's not going to be the end of the world if your child is upset about you laying down the law. And I think sometimes we miss that. We don't want to offend, and God didn't give us children, to be best friends with. That's a benefit, don't get me wrong. But we've got to raise them up. We got to train them. Training has never been fun. I think about when you used to play sports or do whatever. Man, training for the big game was not the most fun, And so when we think about training them up in the way they should go, there are going to be some things that they don't like, and that's okay. That is completely okay. They'll understand later on, and if they don't, that will no longer be our concern. That's between them and the Father. And so, I think sometimes we really have to enforce those things that we've mentioned, and getting on the social media and really kind of being kind of nosy, if you will, to see, what's really going on, because it is a whole lot. When we were coming up, the bully stopped when we got off the school bus. Now he's on all the social media platforms. He's literally everywhere you go, and you really can't shake him. That wasn't a situation like when we were coming up, the school bus, that was it. You didn't see him until the next day. But so everything has changed. Everything is in fast pace, and we do have to really kind of be in all facets of our child's being, just about at all time. And I'm okay with being that overprotective father. I'm good. I'm okay with it. I don't get offended when people say, "Hey, that's a little much." We're okay. We're good.
Sure.
Yes.
And it's tough for parents to also hear. It's like, as you said, we're supposed to guide our kids and train them up. Train them up doesn't necessarily mean that you're their friend. They have friends that are their peer ages.
Yeah.
Our job is not to be their friend. Our job is to train them up, make them responsible citizens, and put a good product out into the world and protect them at the same time. So I can't be your best friend as your parent and say, yeah, let's everybody get on Snapchat, because there's got to be some parental responsibility in that,
Sure.
that I'm not your friend. I am your parent, ultimately.
Yes. And I think that, with the one thing that I think, thank you, Pastor Mohair, for bringing up the bullying part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because not only are they bullying, I've seen where, children have been sexting.
Yes.
And then one of the other kids decided to share that with everybody, those inappropriate pictures. And now, I mean, that is a different form of bullying that we don't really know much about, and now everybody's making fun because that one child participated in sharing those photos. And so I think that those are conversations that definitely need to be had with the children if they have electrical devices, because it is illegal as well. And I've had to talk to detectives to try to save some of my kids from being charged because of it. So it's illegal, parents. So make sure that you're paying attention. You may not, want to get in a space, but at least have a conversation with them about that, because a lot of them are participating and doing it. And if the police gets a hold of those photos, and I've seen it happen, because the phone got taken up because the teacher suspected what they were doing in class, or just, the teacher was suspecting that they were texting or doing something and got the phone and realized what they were doing. And so now it's in the hands of the law enforcement. So it's just so much, as Sister Charles shared earlier, so much stuff going on with the social media aspect of it. So, and because the children are minors, we want to make sure that they're educated and realize who you're talking to. Even if for our children that have turned 18, some of them still may be in high school. You may not know who you're talking to. You may think you're talking to a young lady or a young man that's of age, and come to find out they're not. And if you've done some of those things, then that's another whole door of problems that now you may have. And I'm only sharing this because I've seen it happen. So there's just so many things that we definitely have to keep in mind. And so one thing that I wanted to share, is just in the event that we have some children watching, I wanted to share some coping skills for them as well. And one of the coping skills that I wanted to share is a grounding technique that relates to using your five senses. And parents, you can use this as well. And so whenever you're going through a situation, whether you're stressed out, you got worrying on your mind, and just different things going on that are negative thought processes, we can use our five senses. You can use your sight, even just by closing your eyes and thinking about what's the last item you just saw. Closing your eyes and thinking about, okay, what is it that's blue in the room? What is it that's round in the room? What can I remember or recall? What are all the electrical devices in my room that I saw last? Just using your sight. And we can use our feeling by just literally, you can do it with your eyes open or closed, but just picking up something and saying, okay, what does that feel like? Does that feel rough? Does it feel soft? And what you're doing when you're doing these, you're taking your mind off of the situation, and now you're focusing your mind on whatever that item is or whatever the thing that you saw. And then we can do it with our hearing as well. And sometimes what I do in my sessions, I just have them close their eyes and just listen. Sometimes I'll do weird stuff. I'll make music come on my cell phone. But you want them to really tune in to, what do you hear? Pay attention to everything that's going on around you. And I think that it just helps you focus in on the here and now, of being able to focus on those things you hear. It could be something as simple as the AC unit turning on and off, or you hear the dog walking, or you hear the cars driving outside or blowing their horns, or so the hearing can pick up on a lot of different things. And so sometimes, I make that a part of sessions, and I actually do that. But these are things that you can do on your own Think about those things that you smell. Right now I smell somebody cooking some breakfast. I smell some food. So I'm thinking about, those things that I smell. And then you want to think about those things that you taste. It could have been that burger with those raw onions you just ate. Now your mind is focused in on that. So we can use our five senses. And the goal again is to help take your mind off of the situation and onto something different. And in doing that, if you do it enough, your body is gonna start understanding it. It'll start relaxing your body. It'll be a habit forming technique that you do. And so you want to, that's the whole thing. You want to make it habit forming. So when you get into those moments, you can go there and you can do that. And I'm going to ask Pastor Mohair, on a spiritual perspective, maybe something that they can do right there in that moment to help out with that.
I am so glad you asked. There's a passage of scripture that I'm going to read, and it's Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. And this is my favorite passage, and you'll see why. So there are 7 things that are mentioned in this verse. All right. Now, this is actually the verse that my wife and I got married on. Boom, crazy, right? So check this out. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Verse 9, what you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things. And here's the benefit, and the God of peace will be with you. The crazy thing is all of those things Sister Owens just talked about. It talks about the mind and fixing your mind on things that are going to kind of ground you, if you will. So when you think about things that are true, I am a child of God. I am 5'10". I am bald. All right. I do have eyebrows. When you start to think on the things that are true, it brings you back to a place where it's like, okay, whatever that habitual negative thing that I was thinking, it takes the back burner because you're focused on what the scripture says about you. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And I love the benefit at the end. And the God of peace will be with you. Oh man,
Thank
that
you.
is it. Because the opposite of peace is conflict, irritation,
Yes.
frustration, all of those things that like to get up here and just kind of camp out for the whole week, right? But when you allow yourself to really rest in God's word and what he says about you, man, it transforms the mind. You remember in Romans 12:2, he tells us to be transformed by the renewing of what? Our mind.
Yes.
All right. So I want to encourage you. Philippians 4, you can start at verse 8 and go to verse 9. And you can also read Romans chapter 12, verse 2. And I promise you, if you commit those to memory, meditate on those, that thinking thing, man, it's going to change. And you're going to be like, wow, I can smell those eggs. I can taste that burger with them onions. You're going to be right back where you need to be. And then you want to surround yourself, with people that are positive thinking and they're positive in their actions, because it's crazy how it always happens. But you've heard the saying, birds of the same feather flock together. Isn't it crazy how when people get down, you find other people that are down too? You got to get out of that. You got to let that window up in your room, let that light come on in there, and you got to get out of it. Because guys, if we could fix ourselves, we would have a long time ago. That's God's business. And he wants, I tell you, he wants to have a relationship with you. So thank you. God bless you. My mind is encouraged. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Mohair. And I'm going to tell you this secret. I roll that on off to you because I was about to quote that scripture because that's my favorite one. But I didn't. And you went right on into it.
Hey, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
And so I just want to back it up a little bit at verse 6, where it tells us not to worry about anything, but in everything through prayer and supplication and thanksgiving to let our requests be made known to God. So whatever that thought is that you're worrying about, we're going to roll on down to 9 and we're going to think on these things. Yeah. But before we even get there, we want to make sure that we just know that we don't have to worry about it.
That's it.
All we got to do is lift it up to God. Whatever it is that's going on with our kids, whatever it is that's going on in the school with our homework, with the athletics department, whatever it is that you got going on, take it to God first. Give him thanks in the midst
Yeah.
of it for helping you through it. And the one thing that I hope and pray that everybody took heed to this week is that you walked around that school and prayed, because I did. It was hot, but I walked and I prayed. So if you have not taken the initiative to do that, get some people, get you a group, and walk around that school and pray, because it
Glory
is
to
so
God.
needed. And we know they took prayer out the school, but you still got control in that area. So go
Amen.
and make your rounds and do that. I mean, today is Saturday, ain't nobody at school. you can
Right,
go
right.
you can go today, ain't nobody there, ain't nobody
Yeah,
watching you, they ain't got
that's
cameras
right.
on you. Go on and go do that and make it happen. And I just wanted to share that. And so, do we have
Praise God.
any more Q&As coming through? All right. Do you all have any last tips or advice for the school year that y'all would like to share?
I would just encourage people to be mindful of our children, keep our eyes and ears open. If you have any questions about where to go, I'd be happy to give my information. I don't know how to drop it in the chat, but my my office number at Denton ISD is 940-369-0599. So if a parent has a question about where to go for anything, if it's a mental health need or if it's a social services need, I'll be more than happy to point you in the right direction. So it's Lynn Charles. Feel free to give me a call at that number, and I'll help you get to the direction you need in.
Awesome. All right.
Amen.
So her number has been dropped. If you guys see that down there, Pastor Mohair, any additional tips you would like to share for the school year?
Sure, sure. One thing I will say is, man, don't forget to bless God for another school year. Sure, we have some challenges, we have some difficulty. There are some things on the horizon that are uncertain, but we know who holds tomorrow. And when we know that, it should kind of encourage us to start afresh, a brand new season, a brand new semester, and a brand new opportunities to meet new people. To be the light in a dark place. And I want to encourage all of even the students that are on the call. Man, God has gifted you. He's placed the light inside of you, to shine in that classroom. Maybe it's on the football field. Maybe it's on the basketball court. Maybe it's in the weight room. Wherever you are, God has called you, to shine in that specific area. And the beautiful thing is, since he called you to it, man, he's going to carry you through it. So I want to encourage you. My name is Tomas Mohair. I'm the youth pastor at Antioch. And if you ever want to talk, just hang out, just kick it, I want to encourage you to come on through. My phone number is 940-231-1212, 231-1212. And I am available and will love to meet not only you, but your child too. We kick it on Wednesdays at 7:15, virtually and in person. And also on Sundays, we have something for all age groups. Well, on the second and fourth Sundays of the month, we have teen service, but every Sunday we have children's church, and the nursery is available as well. So if you have children and you're looking for a church home, or you're just looking for some hope, man, come on through Antioch Christian Fellowship 2020 Post Oak. And when I tell you we would love to bear hug your child and bear hug you too, we would love to do that. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. So look forward to seeing you, man. You guys have an outstanding Saturday.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. And so I just want to definitely make sure y'all are catching this. That's being dropped in the chat line about the new National Suicide Hotline is 988. We used to have to call a long 1-800 number. So just here recently, they shortened it. So it's just 988 if you're having any suicidal thoughts. So make sure y'all share that, with anybody that you know that may be going through depression or suicidal ideations. The month of September is Suicide Awareness Month. So I want to make sure that you all hop on board with us and stay in tune, because we will be we'll have physical attendance at Antioch on September the 10th, where we're going to have a suicide awareness prevention event. So definitely we want to encourage you all to come out. More information will be provided for that as well, coming soon. So the Hope Ministry is doing everything to try to just get this whole mental health stigma out there and removed, to make sure that, people are knowledgeable about mental health, in every aspect. So I just want to thank everybody for tuning in on today. And again, you guys, if y'all need any of the information, make sure that you guys just reach out. And also, we have on here about suicide. That week that we're doing it, it's actually Suicide Prevention Week. And that's September the 4th through the 10th. So we'll probably be dropping information all through the week via our social media, on YouTube and probably Facebook as well. And so one last thing that I would like to share with you all, is just making sure that, that take I don't know, just take heed to the information that's been shared today. Share it with somebody. This video is live right now on Facebook. It should be shareable, so share it. Help someone else that maybe didn't get to attend. And so we love to just, as Pastor Mohair shared, to hug on you. So we're gonna love on you today. So again, we just thank you all for participating. And I hope that you all did get the information about the books that were dropped, that were shared as well. I know one of them, if y'all have seen that movie Fireproof, where they have the Love Dare for married couples. They also have a Love Dare for parents by Alex and Stephen Kendrick. And then we have Good to Great in God's Eyes by Chip Ingram. So definitely make sure you check out some of these resources. Now that 40-day Love Dare for the parents, it's 40 days, the same thing like that guy did in the movie in Fireproof, except now you're doing it with your kids. So it's pretty awesome. So check that out. And I think every day is led by a scripture. All right, so I don't have anything else. But again, we thank you all for joining in with us, and you all have a blessed Saturday.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.